On this episode of The Rise the Limit, we examine Chapter 14, The Fifth Taste of Farewell, where a cultural drive for precise category shapes a final meal. The same Japanese impulse that scientifically identified umami, the fifth taste, also created the strict grading and branding for prized Wagyu beef, turning a simple family dinner into a perfectly defined farewell to Osaka. The Fifth Taste of Farewell. Expo's long delay, Wagyu sizzles, a fine feast, taste now classified. Soulless spectacle, a slow surrender before the shrines. Our final day at the Expo. I woke with the grim determination of a man who is at the point where you're no longer aiming for perfection, just completion. After our adventures with Doraemon's futuristic gadgets, I briefly considered if there was a fourth-dimensional pocket somewhere that could produce an anywhere line-jumping door. There was not. Our grand strategy was to arrive even earlier, a masterstroke of planning that landed us even further back in the queue. This is the special genius of the world's Expo. It's a grand spectacle you mostly cannot see, an exercise in managed frustration. Our line moved with the get-up-and-go of continental drift. I developed a brief but intense rivalry with a man in a yellow shirt who, despite being right next to me in the initial chaotic mob, chose the adjacent security lane. He sailed through like a VIP while we were still perfecting the art of standing still. Above, the now constant helicopter buzzed, presumably airdropping emergency water rations to people who had been waiting since yesterday. Once inside, we sprinted to the Japanese pavilion, a building that looked like it was made from folded paper by a giant with a severe caffeine habit. Then it was on to the Netherlands, a country that once tamed the sea and gave the world magnificent art. Their contribution to the future? A dark room where you hold a large glowing ball. The orbs started orange and, with the help of some unseen wizardry, turned blue. My son, recognizing a potent energy source when he saw one, immediately began practicing his Hadouken. It was the most logical thing to do. We also took a selfie in a ceiling reflection, which felt like the peak of our photographic achievements for the day. We wandered to Oman, which had the distinct advantage of almost no line, a fact that should have been a warning. I found it perfectly pleasant, but my wife, the family's Secretary of State, was not moved. Her official policy, declared on the spot, is that a state visit to Oman is not currently on the table. The United Kingdom Pavilion was next, a highly produced affair that managed to be both expensive and profoundly empty, like a movie star's apology. This was the running theme of the Expo. An astonishing amount of money and effort expended to make you feel absolutely nothing. At 2 o'clock we broke. There's a fine line between perseverance and madness, and we had sprinted past it hours ago. We executed a strategic retreat to our room, a tactical maneuver I believe Napoleon would have admired. The surrender was a glorious thing. Snap. The sound of a wasabi pea-chip bag opening was the sweetest music I'd heard all day. That, followed by the silent, frozen perfection of a Häagen-Dazs ice cream cookie. This was the real prize, the hidden pavilion of genuine satisfaction. The sharp heat of the wasabi and the cold cream of the ice cream were more memorable than any glowing orb. Tomorrow we trade the manufactured future for the durable past. We are going to Kyoto to see some temples, real ones, made of wood. A delicious duel, yakiniku versus sukiyaki versus shabu shabu explained. Our final day at the World Expo had been a masterclass in spectacular emptiness. After touring pavilions that delivered high production values and a profound sense of nothing, our spirits were low and our feet were aching. We were due in Kyoto the next day to see some temples, but our time in Osaka required one last act of redemption. We needed a mission. We needed an authentic Japanese meal. We needed beef. We found a place specializing in Wagyu, a fairly expensive meal clocking in at around $70 a head for the set menu. The setup was communal, a popular choice for office workers unwinding after a long day of being productive. You had your choice of cooking method, a grill, a simmering pot, or another one that has since been vaporized from my memory by the sheer force of the meal that followed. This presented an immediate crisis. I was now facing the great Japanese beef trinity, and a single wrong choice could lead to social ruin or, worse, a poorly cooked piece of expensive meat. I now understand that what I was facing was the difference between yakiniku, sukiyaki, and shabu shabu. Yakiniku is what we chose. It's Japanese for grilled meat, and it's exactly as advertised. A grill is set in your table, you get platters of raw meat, and you become the chef. It's an interactive barbecue where the only person you can blame is yourself. Had we chosen sukiyaki, we would have been simmering thinly sliced beef in a sweet, savory broth, then dipping it in raw egg. Shabu shabu involves swishing paper-thin meat for a few seconds in a light broth. Its name an onomatopoeia for the sound it makes, a sound I would have been too nervous to attempt correctly. I took to my grilling duties with the focus of a blacksmith forging a legendary sword. As I arranged the various cuts of exquisitely marbled beef on the grate, I assumed the self-appointed title of Grill Master. I was Prometheus, bringing the gift of perfectly seared Wagyu to my little tribe. My authority, however, was immediately challenged by my son, who discovered he could order more meat from an iPad. While I was carefully tending the fire, he was the digital quartermaster, summoning fresh battalions of A5 sirloin and short rib with the tap of a screen. My ancient art was being fueled by his futuristic command. It was a beautiful partnership. As the grill master, I felt entitled to the best seat, a position of honor and control. This, I imagined, must be a deeply traditional concept. I pictured ancient samurai lords arguing over who got to sit farthest from the door to avoid assassins and closest to the food to avoid starvation. This is, in a way, a real thing. The Japanese have terms for this: kamisa, the upper seat of honor for the most important person, and shimoza, the humble lower seat near the entrance. In a business dinner, the boss gets the kamisa. In our family dinner, I, the man with the tongs, laid my claim. My throne was the spot with the clearest access to the grill and a direct line of sight to my son's iPad, ensuring the beef supply chain remained unbroken. My wife and son seemed untroubled by my silent, self-important power grab. The meal concluded with a simple strawberry dessert. After the rich, smoky drama of the beef, it was a quiet, sweet period at the end of a very satisfying sentence. It was not an unpleasant way to say goodbye to Osaka. The art of the cow, decoding the world of Wagyu. My brief, heroic stint as grill master at that yakiniku place in Osaka left me with a question that lingered longer than the smell of grilled meat on my clothes. The beef was so ridiculously good, it felt less like a product of agriculture and more like it had been fabricated in a secret lab dedicated to pure deliciousness. As it turns out, the truth is somehow even stranger. This level of quality is no accident. It's the result of a life so coddled it makes the average house cat look like a hardened survivalist. Wagyu cattle are raised on a founding principle of absolute stress elimination. A stressed cow, I was told, makes for tough meat. Farmers therefore cultivate a zen-like tranquility with clean water, fresh air, and routines as predictable as a Swiss train. Hearing this, I thought of our family's chaotic scrambles through Japanese airports and train stations. On the stress metric, we would grade out as a C- at best, suitable only for jerky. The stories about beer and massages are mostly branding, a fun myth to distract from the real painstaking work. The brushing is for circulation, and the occasional beer is just to stimulate a fussy appetite in the summer heat. It is not, as I had sincerely hoped, a nightly bovine pub crawl where hairy patrons debate the finer points of feedstock over a frothy pint. This isn't just about comfort, it's about engineering. This meticulous approach reflects a national obsession with detail, the same one that had airport baggage handlers arranging luggage with geometric precision and that built an entire island for Kansai Airport on a foundation of adjustable jacks. It's a culture that believes if something is worth doing, it's worth overdoing to the point of beautiful absurdity. To call Wagyu beef is like calling a Formula One car a vehicle. You're technically correct, but you're missing the entire universe of obsessive engineering that makes it what it is. The defining trait of genuine Wagyu is its intense marbling, called shimafuri, or frosted. Unlike the thick blob of fat on a normal steak, this is a delicate, intricate web woven directly through the muscle. This fat melts at a lower temperature than regular beef fat, dissolving almost instantly in your mouth. It's why the steak doesn't just taste rich. It feels like it's vanishing on your tongue. This quality is so prized that it's meticulously graded by the Japan Meat Grading Association, a group of inspectors with the sternest palates on the planet. They issue a two-part score. The letter, A, B, or C, measures the yield, but the number, 1 through 5, is the one that counts. It's a final grade based on marbling, color, and texture. The highest possible score, the holy grail of beef, is A5. This means you are looking at what is officially, certifiably, the pinnacle of Japanese beef. The most famous brands like Kobe, Matsusaka, and Omi are like the regional grand champions of this competition, each producing their own version of A5 perfection. This obsessive documentation leads to a clear dividing line between the original article and its international cousins. Authentic Wagyu from Japan is 100% full blood from one of 4 native breeds, and its genetics are now a protected national asset. The Wagyu herds in America and Australia were started from a small number of animals exported before the ban. To build their numbers, farmers crossbred them with local cattle, usually Angus. The result is fantastic, a sort of best of both worlds steak that marries the buttery richness of Wagyu with the classic beefy flavor of a Western steak. It's a brilliant hybrid, but it's not the thoroughbred. One is a masterpiece of uncompromising purity, the other a masterpiece of clever collaboration. Umami, the fifth taste unveiled. Having just learned that Wagyu beef is graded with the kind of analytical rigor usually reserved for plutonium, it wasn't a huge leap to discover that Japan's pursuit of deliciousness goes much, much deeper. It's like finding out that after Isaac Newton defined gravity, he also wrote the definitive rulebook for why a really good cookie is so satisfying. For most of human history, we were told there were 4 basic tastes: sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. But there was always a 5th column infiltrator, a flavor that gave depth to broth, made aged cheese so compelling, and turned a ripe tomato into a minor religious experience. This savory ghost in the machine was finally cornered in 1908 by a professor at Tokyo Imperial University named Kikunai Ikeda. Most people who enjoy a good bowl of soup simply eat it. Professor Ikeda looked at his dashi, the kelp-based broth that is the bedrock of Japanese cooking, and decided to destroy it in the name of knowledge. He evaporated an enormous quantity of the stuff, boiling it away until all that remained were tiny crystals of glutamic acid. He tasted one, and in a moment that should be memorialized in a statue made of bouillon cubes, he identified the flavor he was looking for. He called it umami, the essence of deliciousness. It took the rest of the world's scientists decades to catch up and officially find the specific receptors on our tongues, presumably after a very long and argumentative committee meeting. The science gets better. Umami comes from glutamates, but it has a superpower called synergy. Combine a glutamate-rich food, like the professor's kombu kelp, with something full of nucleotides, like the dried bonito flakes used to complete dashi, and the umami effect doesn't just add up, it multiplies by a factor of 8. This isn't cooking. It's culinary mathematics. The Japanese had been creating this scientifically perfect flavor explosion for centuries entirely by feel. Once you've isolated the building blocks of flavor, is it any surprise that you'd also invent a system for branding the animal it comes from? The Japanese practice of branding beef by region is sold to the world as something like the French concept of terroir for wine, where the soil and climate give a grape its soul. But this feels more specific, more bureaucratic. This isn't just about misty valleys and happy cows. This is about paperwork. The idea took off after 1868, when Japan opened its ports and Westerners arrived with a conspicuous appetite for steak. The local Tajima cattle from around Hyogo Prefecture were exceptional, and since they were all shipped out of the port of Kobe, foreigners just started calling it Kobe beef. It was a branding masterstroke born of geographical convenience, like calling every package that comes to your house mailbox. Today, that happy accident has been replaced by a system of rules so strict it makes the IRS look like a free-for-all. For a steak to bear a famous regional name like Kobe, Matsusaka, or any of the 200 other brands, it has to present a flawless resume. It must have the right purebred parents, be born and raised in the correct zip code, eat a provincially approved diet, and finally score high enough on its final exam at the processing plant. You're not just eating a steak, you're eating a guarantee, an edible certificate of authenticity that says this particular animal had a better and more carefully documented life than most people. Our Osaka farewell revealed that a culture's identity can be found not in a sprawling expo, but on a small grill, where the drive to classify everything from the fifth taste to the grade of beef is a form of art. That commitment to precision, of course, provides the perfect setup for our own fumbling arrival in Kyoto. Next time, we trade certified quality for questionable train choices and see how ancient serenity holds up against a $70 sushi order. If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue is available right now as a Kindle book on Amazon, Shinkansen, and Sensibility. And if you want to come behind the scenes and get bonus content, you can join my community on Patreon. On this episode of The Rise the Limit, we present Chapter 15. For $70 more, a Buddha. A Kyoto temple destroyed by floods was revived in the 20th century, not by a single master, but by inviting regular people to carve 1,200 distinct stone figures of Buddha's disciples. After a $70 sushi order, our narrator's journey through the ancient city becomes a meditation on the cost of experience versus the worth of communal creation. For $70 more, a Buddha. Osaka train mix-up. Sushi, $80 bite. Ghosts pacified, stone smiles. Wrong rails. A rich repast in Kyoto. One expects to arrive in Kyoto with a certain amount of grace, perhaps gliding in on a silent bullet train to a city of serene temples. We, on the other hand, arrived with all the poise of a bowling ball dropped into a canoe. My attempt to navigate the Osaka train station resulted in me herding my family into the wrong car, a rolling box of humanity that made a New York subway car look like a private lounge. I had blundered us into economy. Mere feet away in the premium car, civilized people rested in plush seats, contemplating the universe. I, meanwhile, was engaged in a quiet but desperate battle for elbow supremacy with a man who smelled faintly of dried squid. Do you know how easy it is to upgrade your seat? You just find a conductor and hand him a few yen. It is a transaction of astonishing simplicity, a fact I learned precisely too late. This knowledge is my gift to you. a pearl of wisdom forged in the crucible of a cramped train car. We eventually spilled out into the city and found our way to the Kyoto Hilton, a building that looked as if it had been designed by someone who was given a massive budget and a box of Legos. After checking in, my son, a small person who operates with the migratory instincts of a monarch butterfly but for high-end Japanese cuisine, made his singular demand: sushi. We found a quiet spot downstairs. He perched on his stool, scanned the conveyor belt with the focus of a bomb disposal expert, and began to grab plates. He did not order the simple tuna roll or the humble cucumber maki. No. He summoned forth fatty tuna and premium salmon. He ate with a quiet, methodical fury. A tiny connoisseur dismantling $70 American worth of the ocean's finest offerings. It was a massacre of marine life funded by my credit card. A small boy with a child's appetite, and the bill of a whaling captain. Haunted halls, the hallowed haven of Tenjuan. What separates a premium experience from the regular kind? Sometimes it's obvious, like the gulf between a spacious train car and one where you're intimately acquainted with a stranger's elbow. Other times it's less clear. After lunch, we stood before the sprawling Nanzenji temple complex, a major player in Kyoto's temple scene. But the main attraction wasn't my target. I'd read about one of its sub-temples, a smaller, quieter place. We were on a mission for the boutique experience, the craft brew of spiritual enlightenment. We paid our fee and stepped into Tenjuan. The first thing that greets you is a rock garden. Not just any rock garden, but a Karisansui dry landscape, a sea of raked white sand so precise it looked like it was rendered by a computer. The path through it is made of diamond-shaped stone pavers. It felt less like ancient Zen and more like a 1980s vision of the future. A place where a philosopher in a silver jumpsuit might contemplate the universe. It was austere, silent, and aggressively geometric. You walk through the main hall, a cool, dark corridor of polished wood, and emerge into another world. The South Garden is everything the Rock Garden is not. It's a riot of life, built around a pond teeming with fat, prosperous-looking koi. A path winds through a dense thicket of maple and bamboo, and the air is filled with the sound of a small waterfall. It's the kind of place you'd design if you wanted to convince someone you were a nature deity. The whole thing was rebuilt in 1602 by a samurai scholar named Hosokawa Yusai, a combination of professions that seems wildly contradictory, like being a linebacker who also writes sonnets. Apparently, the temple's main hall contains 32 priceless sliding door paintings by a master artist, but they are almost never on display, which is a bit like a restaurant bragging about a world-class chef who only cooks on alternate Tuesdays in February. But the real story, the one that makes this whole complex exist, isn't about the gardens or the phantom paintings, it's about a ghost. Back in the 13th century, this land housed the retirement villa of Emperor Kamiyama. The place, however, had a spirit problem. Things went bump in the night, misfortunes mounted, and the imperial court was spooked. The emperor called in the big guns, priests from all the major sects who performed elaborate ceremonies with all the spiritual bells and whistles. They were like a series of increasingly frantic IT support technicians, but nothing worked. The ghost remained. Finally, someone suggested a quiet Zen priest named Mukan Fumon. He showed up, didn't chant, didn't light incense, didn't make a fuss. He just walked into the haunted palace, sat down and started meditating. He sat there, radiating a force field of pure, undiluted calm. Faced with this profound lack of drama, the ghost apparently got bored and just left. It was vanquished not by power, but by stillness. The emperor was so impressed he gave the priest his entire villa, which became Nanzenji. This little temple, Tenjuan, was built later to honor that very priest. So we stood there in a garden built by a poet warrior on land given away by an emperor, at a monument to a man who successfully weaponized tranquility. It's a quiet legacy, built not on a grand victory, but on sitting so still that even the paranormal lose interest. It made me think of my son back at the hotel, who had waged his own successful, albeit much louder, campaign against $70 worth of premium sushi. Maybe the best experiences really are the ones you pay a little extra for. The Temple of 1,200 Smiles. The last temple, the one built where an emperor supposedly got spooked by a ghost, was a study in quiet perfection. Every rock and raked patch of sand had its place. It was profoundly peaceful, a place for silent meditation on things like the impermanence of imperial villas. The next temple on my list, a place I'd read about that promised something different, was not that. It was something else entirely. It was the spiritual equivalent of a flash mob. Tucked away in the hills of Arashiyama is Otage Nenbutsuji, a temple that has had, to put it gently, a rough go of it. Founded in the 8th century, its early history reads like a list of insurance claims: flood, fire, typhoon, neglect. By the 1950s, it was a wreck. Then came a new head priest, Kocho Nishimura, a sculptor who looked at the ruins and had an idea that was either madness or genius. He decided to rebuild not just the temple but its congregation, and he decided to do it with stone and a little help from his friends. Lots of friends. His plan was a masterclass in creative crowdsourcing. Between 1981 and 1991, he invited regular people to the temple, taught them how to carve, and had them create statues of the Reikan, Buddha's disciples. The result is what stands here today, 1,200 stone figures, each one a product of amateur hands and individual personality. This isn't the work of a single master striving for a unified, solemn vision. This is what happens when you give 1,000 people a hammer and chisel and tell them to find enlightenment. The effect is pure joy. It's a garden party where the guests have been standing still for 30 years, slowly gathering moss. You wander the hillside and find 2 figures sharing a bottle of sake, their stone cups permanently clinked. Another wears a pair of what look suspiciously like circa 1985 Walkman headphones. One Reikan holds a tennis racket, his expression a mix of fierce concentration and the dawning horror that he's about to double fault for eternity. Many are said to be self-portraits, meaning somewhere in Japan there is an old man who saw his true self as a cheerful, bald guy holding a cat. This is the beauty of this place. It suggests the path to spiritual awareness doesn't have to be a grim march. It can have laughter. I saw a Reikan with a magnificent grin sharing a joke with his neighbor. I saw a Reikan cradling a baby with a tenderness that defied the stone. I saw a Reikan who looked exactly like he was posing for a driver's license photo he knew was going to be bad. Where bamboo scrapes, the sky and monkeys roam free. Still buoyed by the sight of 1,000 cheerful stone statues, I made a bold travel proclamation. I would take a 30-minute walk down to the Arashiyama district. This was, to put it mildly, a very unpopular decision. My family greeted the suggestion with the same enthusiasm a cat shows for a bath. But I persisted, and the walk was surprisingly pleasant. The air was thick but not too hot, and it was fun to be back on the same road where my wife and I got hopelessly lost a decade ago. It winds past these beautiful, imposing homes whose owners must be profoundly weary of the endless parade of tourists peering over their meticulously crafted fences. We even found it. The exact spot. The scene of the great $30 swindle of our youth. It's closed now, boarded up like a crime scene, which is fitting. Seeing it brought the memory back with perfect clarity. Lured in for tea, we sat in a damp garden while mosquitoes acting as tiny loan sharks extracted their payment in blood. We were served 2 gelatinous cubes resembling Turkish delight, dusted with matcha powder as if to make it seem exotic. $30. At the time, that felt like a state secret had been extorted from me. I was incensed, especially after later seeing a handwritten sign from other victims tacked to a nearby pole. In retrospect, it's amusing what used to pass for a travel disaster. My frustrations have since graduated to a higher weight class. These days, it takes more to ruin my trip than a simple shakedown. A good ruin requires a $70 taxi in Oslo, or perhaps a 2-hour wait in an immigration line at Charles de Gaulle. Eventually, we made it to the heart of Arashiyama, which was just as packed as I remembered. The district is nestled at the base of the mountains, a place where the capital's careful styling gives way to wilder scenery. The main attraction is the Togetsukyo Bridge, whose name means Moon Crossing Bridge, a far more poetic title than the more accurate Tourist Crossing Bridge. It spans the Hozugawa River, where you can watch boats glide down the gentle rapids, or if you're here in summer, witness the nightly spectacle of cormorant fishing. It is a tradition where birds do all the work and fishermen get all the credit, a business model many a CEO would envy. The main event, of course, is the bamboo grove. People describe the walk as otherworldly, but navigating the dense crowd felt less like strolling through a sacred forest and more like being swept along in a human river. The bamboo stalks themselves are incredible, shooting straight up like a silent green cathedral holding up the sky. It is a beautiful place, if you can find a square foot of it to call your own. The path leads you from the towering bamboo to its teeming masses. Its teeming masses are led away from the towering bamboo. It's a place of strange contrasts, where you can contemplate a serene Zen garden one moment, and watch someone elbow their way into the perfect selfie the next. Back at the hotel, decision-making was outsourced to hunger. We ended up at a Japanese-Italian place. The ham they used in everything was astonishingly flavorful, with a smoky, charcoal taste that permeated each dish. They do seem to love their ham in Japan. I had a 3-cheese pizza, splashed it with Tabasco, and we picked at some bruschetta and a Caesar salad, both featuring, you guessed it, more ham. To round out the meal, I ordered a side of deep-fried corn. It was bizarrely compelling, the golden kernels arriving hot and crispy like tiny edible jewels. Discovering those 1,200 individual stone Buddhas was a beautiful reminder of community effort. But that sense of peace is about to be tested. Join me next time as we confront the violent history memorialized in a blood ceiling before my travel luck spectacularly runs out at the new Nintendo Museum. That's all for this chapter of The Rise the Limit. If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue is available right now as a Kindle book on Amazon, Shinkansen, and Sensibility. And if you want to come behind the scenes and get bonus content, you can join my community on Patreon.